Hello and welcome to the first proper episode of the Little Pod of Horrors.
Woohoo.
I'm Gordon, and I'm happy to report that Boz has decided to show up again and continue his co-host spot.
Hello.
Hello, Boz.
How are you?
How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, thank you.
Good, good.
Horrid up to the eyeballs.
Really?
Looking forward
what
to
have
this.
you been watching? What have you been watching?
What have I been watching? I've been going a bit nostalgic, actually. Because I watched the new Fright Night last year.
All right.
And I was sort of... I had very sketchy memories of first time I saw the original. And then I saw the original was playing on TV, so I watched that. And it wasn't as good as I remember.
Okay.
So, it is good, it's great, and the effects for the time and all that kind of thing, but it's way more hammy than I remember. And actually, now putting the two films next to each other, I think the new one's actually quite good. That might get us some email, so I may just leave that there.
Oh, okay. Obviously my confession coming here is I haven't seen either of them.
Really?
Yeah, I had the Fright Night DVD bought for me many, many Christmases ago. I think my mum and dad bought it for me. And I just never got round to watching it. It was one of those ones that sat on the shelf staring at me going, you must watch me, you must watch me. And so I just kind of kept putting it off going, I'm just going to watch some other crap instead. And so I do need to, because especially when I seen the new one, when I watched the previews of it, I thought, that looks quite good. And then it was coming down to, do I watch the original first, or the new one, or do I just ignore one of them?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to have to sit down and do a double bill of that if it pops up on Netflix or whatever.
I think you will appreciate the old one more if you see it first, simply because it is of its time, and what I found, the new one made things a bit more believable, because sort of remakes, modern remakes, although they're often terrible aberrations of what they should be, we as people now are so much more, well, you wouldn't do that. Why is he doing that? I find myself doing it all the time with horror films, and I find with the new ones, very often I'll be going, yeah, well, don't do... And then you realise the director said, okay, go as if you're going to go and do this, but then don't at the last minute, because he knows that the audience is shouting at the screen. So it's different in that regard.
I'll definitely have to check it out at some point.
The other one, I only finished watching it today, actually, so I saw it was on again. City of the Living Dead, Lucio Fulci, from around 1980, I believe. Have you seen that one?
Wow. I haven't seen that, no.
I actually missed this off my horror pedigree thing from last week, or the last show. One of the things I meant to mention is after this sort of birthing into enjoying horror films, I then met a friend who we lovingly called Mark the Bastard.
Nice name.
Sort of went along the lines of, Mark the Bastard? What a bastard. He was a fun guy, but he had a very strong addiction to horror, and mainly, if it was banned, he was interested. If it was legal, he wasn't so interested. So he spent his life hunting down films that didn't have a certificate from the BBFC for various reasons. And I don't know how it happened, but we started to watch stuff. We used to have like parties where we get together and sort of drink and eat junk food, and it'd just be like horror movie parties sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think he sort of latched on to me for his, I've got this new movie, I need somebody to watch it with, come round and watch it. And the stuff I saw, but a lot of that was Fulci stuff. Zombie Flesh Eaters, Cannibal Holocaust. He's responsible for me seeing all of those, what were termed video nasties, which by today's standards you go, it's not so bad.
Yeah, it's all pretty tame these days.
It is. And this was of that ilk, I think. And I think I saw part of it way back then. And I thought I wanted to give it a rewatch. Acting's dreadful.
Did you expect anything more?
No, not at all from him. But I mean, I don't know how it works, sort of language-wise. Because at first I thought, because he's an Italian director, I thought it was Italian overdubbed with English, and I realised no, they're talking English, but it's so clearly reshot audio and overdubbed again in English, so it just looks a bit sort of wrong. But there's countless times in this movie of people just standing there with their mouth open, and he loves these lingering shots of the eyes while people are talking and stuff, and just from one set of eyes to another set of eyes, and when something gruesome's about to happen, they just stare dumbfounded. And I'm like, grab a stick and hit him round the head, would you? just do something. I mean, it is one of the more classic scenes in this, is somebody vomiting up their own intestines, which I believe at the time was probably what got its reputation. But it's actually, it holds up really well, that effect. It's very well done. And it really does make you go, oh yeah, oh, that's horrible. But it is one of those, though, it's over long for what it is. And it's really quite tenuous at times. And you just sort of, the other thing that annoyed me slightly is three people die in the same way, with the same gore effect. We've already seen that. It's basically a grab of the back of the head, somehow strong enough to crunch the skull, and grab a fistful of brains and sort of pull it out. So you get like the brain matter sort of coming out the back of the skull, and you're like, first time, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool, that stands up. But then did it 2 more times before the end of the film. I'm like, you can't do that!
No, that's just cheating.
No. So
it might be something you maybe not noticed back then when it first came out, or maybe that's part of the charm of it.
Or maybe I was just entirely too drunk the first time I saw it. That is the case with a lot of my first horror film viewings. Certainly was with The Exorcist.
Oh no, see, The Exorcist, I first saw The Exorcist, it was in the movies, when it got the re-release. I think it was around the time it would get re-released when The Sixth Sense came out, or the Blair Witch Project. I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
But I think it was the Blair Witch Project, actually. I did it in a double bill, and went to the movies one day myself and watched it.
Yourself?
Myself, yeah.
Did you sleep that night?
Yes,
oh, okay.
But watching the movie, people were laughing at it, because a lot of it is incredibly comical by today's standards. But this is I've only watched it once all the way through. But when I came out of it, I did have I can't really describe the feeling, but I was off. It was like I'd witnessed something that was really strange that I don't think I ever wanted to witness again. But I knew was comical and funny at the time. And it was just, I can't really put it into words, but I just had this really strange feeling at the end of it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, I can understand why people would have been calling for it to be banned and classed as video nasty and everything like that, because there is some shocking scenes.
Oh, definitely. And it's well done.
Yes.
It's a masterpiece.
But unfortunately, when you've seen, I think I've seen the spoof. What was that, a Leslie Nielsen one?
Repossessed.
Repossessed, okay. So I had remembered some key scenes out of that one as well, which was kind of adding to the whole comedic effect of it.
Yeah.
But it still didn't take away from me the impact of watching the movie on its own. But yeah, since then, I've never had the desire to go back and really watch it again. I think mainly because it's so slow. It's a very slow burner.
It is, yeah.
To get into it, which I didn't realise going into it the first time. But now that I know that, I don't think it's something I could actually easily just sit through just to get to the last half hour when you get all the shocks and everything.
Well, for me, it's one of those films that's actually hardest to watch, mainly because of sort of religious upbringing, maybe, and hearing, people believing in demon possession. I suppose it makes it a bit more near the knuckle for you. But I first saw it on a very bad VHS back when it still didn't have a certificate, basically. And like I say, I'd had a few drinks, and it had some impact on me, but obviously the quality, the size of the screen, blah, blah, blah. So I was able to sort of chalk it up and say, yeah, I've seen that, it's fine. And then when it got re-released, probably about the same time you saw it, I went with a couple of friends, because I have to see this on the big screen. It's just sort of a sense of completion, I guess. I have to see it like that. And I really enjoyed it on the big screen. And the same thing happened in the cinema. Lots of nervous the laughing I took as a way of releasing the uncomfortable feeling it was generating in people.
Yeah.
So yeah, people laugh in relief after they've had a jump scare.
Yes.
It was that kind of and the more the film went on, the less the laughing became and the more nervous sounding it became. And that made me enjoy it even more, because I knew what was coming, And when the film finished, my friend Gavin had come with us, and he, unfortunately, it was so packed, we turned up late, he had to sit behind us. So there were 2 of us in front and 1 behind, and we stood up, turned round, and I grinned at him and went, "Are you all right?" And he just sitting there, staring at the credits rolling, and he went, "That scared the shit out of me."
And I can see why you would think that, because, like I say, I don't know what the feeling was. It wasn't fear, but I can see why people would be scared at it. Because there's a lot, like I say, it's very, very well done.
Yeah.
And the fact that it does, I think the fact it's scarier, or has more of an impact, is the fact it's using a young girl, which isn't always the nicest thing to see, is young kids being tortured on screen, whether it's a demonic possession or anything else you're seeing.
Yeah.
So I think that added more to the impact on my side was, wow, she's really young. And this is happening, and she's doing all these things, not just through demonic possession, but the fact that as an actress, she's doing all these things.
Yeah.
It's one that'll stick with me, that I've watched on the big screen, I've watched it, but I don't really have a desire to go back and watch it again.
Well, they keep trying to do it again, don't they? And there's a film coming out next month, which I fully intend to go and see, and fully intend to talk about on the show, and that's Devil Inside. And it's another one of these, we're trying to be the Exorcist films, and so far all the ones I've watched have fallen short, and I wonder if maybe we should do a sort of an exorcism show.
Yeah,
Or
possibly.
not possession show, rather.
Yes, because there are a lot of, certainly, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago, there was a kind of huge spate of them, it seemed to be, and they were trying to bring back, and I actually enjoyed a couple of them. I think The Exorcism of Emily Rose was one of them, and I can't remember the name of another one, I just saw it a few weeks ago.
Well, there's an Anthony Hopkins one that I haven't seen, which is supposed to be very good. I think it's the same sort of lines. It's called Right, or The Right.
Oh yeah, that was a recent one, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's on my watch list. I've been told that's very good, so...
But yeah, I think that's definitely a show we should do.
Yeah.
There's lots of different takes on it.
Absolutely.
Some of them will be good, and some of them will be really bad. The Haunting in Connecticut, I'm looking at you. Anyway, sorry, maybe that's not classed as an exorcism show, but that's a really bad movie.
No, it has to go on the list.
Okay.
For that show.
Fine. It's really bad.
Just we've got something to punch. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Oh yeah, I can punch that out all day.
How the hell did we get onto The Exorcist, by the way?
I blame you.
Tangents.
Yes, I blame you, sir. You are the tangent king.
Sorry.
That's all right.
You knew what you were getting in for.
Yes, that's very true. But unfortunately not Exorcist related. I've only been able to watch 2 movies in the last couple of weeks. One of which being Quarantine 2, Terminal.
Yes.
Which wasn't bad. I knew what I was expecting going into it. It was pretty cool that it's set around the same time as Quarantine is going on. Which isn't a spoiler, because you find that out pretty early in the movie, as long as you're paying attention.
Right.
It took some stupid turns with it. It's not really a movie, I think, that needed to be made. But then again, I don't think Quarantine needed to be made.
No.
But if it's on and you're not really, you can't find the remote control or whatever, then I'd give it a watch. It's just, it passes an hour and a half. So there's nothing special. It's acted fairly well, some pretty cool death scenes in it, but it's just one of those meh movies I watched because it was on Netflix.
I saw it on Netflix and went, really? Seriously?
Yeah, I knew they talked about doing a second one, but I didn't realise they'd actually done it. But I haven't seen Rec 2, so I didn't know if it was just a complete remake of Rec 2.
No, it's
or
not.
it was just went their own separate ways. So I'm glad to know it's went its own separate ways. And we'll get round to watching Rec 2 at some point.
I heard some very sniffy reviews about Rec 2, so I watched it with a sort of sense of trepidation, really, thinking, nah. And Rec 2 is in the same building, and it picks up exactly where the first one finished. Well, almost exactly where the first one finished. And I actually really liked where they went with it by the end.
That's good then.
And I enjoyed the film.
It's one I'll definitely have to look out for. It's just getting the time to actually source that kind of movie. And find time to watch a subtitle movie on my own is the hard part.
Yeah.
Speaking of subtitle movies, one I did watch was now my pronunciation of this could be wrong, but I'm reading it as Atrocious, which is a Spanish horror movie.
Oh, good.
Which is, I think it's Atrocious, Atrocious.
Yeah.
Now, it might mean something different in Spanish, or the way you say it. The movie isn't atrocious in the bad sense of the word. Some of the stuff that you're seeing on screen is pretty bad, and it's kind of it's shot in that Blair Witch styley, found footage, 2 cameras recording at the same time kind of thing, which I mean has been done to death. But I quite like it. It's something that if it's done well, then I don't mind that it's a found footage, jump up and down camera, getting scares from off camera kind of thing, which is where a lot of this comes from. But I think it's one that's good, solid 3-4 star movie. I don't want to say too much about it because it might pop up later on in one of our shows if we look at some kind of Spanish horror.
Well, if you say to me Spanish horror, I'm instantly going to go out and see it, mainly because of the pedigree of Spanish horrors recently, but also because I'm learning the Spanish language. So it's, I get to indulge a love of mine and practice as well.
It's best of both worlds there. But this is one I think you should definitely watch.
Okay.
It is. I mean, it's another short one, an hour and a half, but it's got a very interesting twist at the end of it, which I liked. Now that I think about it, you could see it coming, but I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Atrocious is not a Spanish word.
Is it not?
If you translate atrocious from English into Spanish, you get abominable.
Okay.
Or atroz.
Well, maybe I need to look into why it's actually called that then.
Yeah. Well, that's just according to my dictionary, but it might be wrong. So.
No, I mean, like I say, I don't know. I'm reading it as atrocious, and I don't know why you would. Because at first I thought, why would you call your movie this? I just assumed it meant something completely different in Spanish. I don't know. Maybe that's what the director was going for.
Or maybe because the word in Spanish, people would have just been expecting a big fluffy white snowman to walk out. Be the abominable snowman.
Quite possibly. Maybe it's scary over there for them. I don't know. I don't guess you get much snow, so an abominable snowman would be scary for you, wouldn't it? Oh, okay.
I've got one more movie if you've got time. I know we're going long on this, but...
we've got time.
I watched another one called Prowl, and again, this is one of those... It's on Netflix, don't know anything about it, so I'm going to watch it.
Okay.
Oh, my
really?
word. It's one of those where I'm going to talk about it, and I don't care if I spoil it.
Okay.
Because there's nothing to spoil. Seriously. A group of kids go on a road trip. They're trying to get from somewhere. It was so inconsequential, I don't even remember why. Car breaks down. Guy with truck turns up, offers them a lift, puts them in the back of the trailer, takes them to a warehouse, parks it up. They opens a door, and the only way out is into this empty warehouse. And things are climbing around on the walls and ceilings and take people and eat them, basically.
Okay.
But it's the reason why is just like, what? This is like they're breeding this family of vampire type things that can walk around in the daylight. And I mean, honestly, I only watched it about a week ago, and it's instantly forgettable.
Right. Okay. One of them.
And it sort of gets right to the end of the movie, and I think it's like certain people have this power or ability or whatever, and the main protagonist girl at the end of it turns out to be one of them.
Oh, really?
And just sort of kills somebody, and then they just sit down and go, right, yeah, I'm fine. Roll credits.
I hate movies like that.
It was so pointless.
So it is. It just makes you work. Oh, they can't even end it properly, or it's an ending like that. You're just like, what?
Yeah, no suspense, no terror, no fear, no, none of the special effects stuck with me. There was probably some good facial prosthetics, but beyond that, I was like, what's the point? I really didn't enjoy it.
Did you even get any boobies in it?
If I did, they were completely unmemorable.
See, then, if you're going to put a bad B movie out there, then come on.
Speaking of B movies, should we introduce another section?
Yes, we shall. So, see, do you like that link there? That was unintentional, but we're going to keep this one in. But yes, we shall go with our very first review in the section entitled...
A is for apple. B is for
Boz.
C is for crayons. D is for drum.
Like scrotum, here it is in a nutshell.
Okay, everybody, this was a silly little idea of mine. B is for Boz, because Boz loves his crappy B movies, as you just heard. Although I watched Prowl not expecting it to be a B movie. But the B movie I watched recently for this little section was Murder Party. This is a fantastic little off-the-wall, low-budget... I mean, it looks like it was shot on an old XL1 camera. The quality really isn't up to snuff. And basically, a guy walking along, going home, finds a letter on the street, and it says, you're invited to a murder party, be here, and it's Halloween, basically. Mm-hmm. So he makes this... Well, they sort of show him in his flat, and it's this... He's got a really mundane life, just he's a computer nerd, and he's got nothing going on really, so this is why this is attractive enough an offer for him to go out. So he makes actually a pretty cool costume, which is like a suit of armour and a sword out of cardboard, and turns up to this murder party. And of course the twist is the idea of this is the murder party is that the schmuck they invite to the murder party, they're going to murder and film it. Okay. And it's really silly. It's really tongue-in-cheek. I'm not going to spoilerise it because it's one I think is worth a look. If you just want a giggle at one of those really silly movies, it's worth a watch. And I'm going to put one little nugget out there. There is a chainsaw in this movie, but it's an electric chainsaw.
Okay.
So the chase scene at the end, well, one of them is chasing another one with a chainsaw. He has to find a power outlet before he can use it.
I thought you were going to tell me just as he got to kill him, he pulled the plug out or something.
Nothing so cliched. I'm not going to say where it goes, but even if just to get to that point, it slugs up in the middle a bit, and they draw out some bits they possibly shouldn't. But when it just goes frenetic at the end, they've sort of lulled you into a sense of, these people are all a bit wet, they haven't got it in them, nothing's really going to happen, and they lure you to that point, and then it all just kicks off right at the end. Right. And it made me chuckle, and there's some good silly deaths and gore and stuff like that, and it's got a bit of everything, but done in a real B-movie style. So that is this week's B is for Boz.
A is for apple. B is for
Boz.
C is for crayons. D is for drum.
Like scrotum, here it is in a nutshell.
The joy of Netflix is there's lots of trashy horror out there. So
yeah.
I don't know whether it's made all the way to the UK yet, but certainly on the US site, there are a lot of trashy horrors out there. So trying to pick when you don't know anything about a movie, trying to pick the gems from all the trash is quite difficult. But
right.
I think it's based on the rating system. The more you rate, the better recommendations they give you, and it does actually work a bit on that. So,
good.
I'm sure we shall find plenty of movies for B's for Boz out of Netflix.
And if anyone from Netflix did just happen to be listening, please put more horror films on the UK Netflix. I know you're building the library, but it's a bit small. A few more, please. Thank you.
And if you want to sponsor us, you can.
Yes.
We'll take free Netflix. But now with that out of the way, I think it's probably time we do a full 180 here.
Yeah.
And kind of let the listeners in on the movie that we kind of ramped up on last week's show. Mm-hmm. As we're going to come in with a bang. So if you're ready for it, let's go.
T'as pu les voir? Ils ont changé, mais c'est eux.
The IMDb synopsis on this is a young woman's quest for revenge against the people who kidnapped and tortured her as a child leads her and a friend, who's also a victim of child abuse, on a terrifying journey into a living hell of depravity. Now, personally, I don't think that synopsis does this movie justice. No. But if you want a few more clues as to what it might be, number one, it's French. So that should tell you something about the levels of depravity in it. Number two, it was released in September 2008, so it's a fairly recent one. And number 3, it was written and directed by Pascal Loggia. So, with that, what was the name of this week's movie, Mr. Boz?
That would be Martyrs.
Yes. Now, I take full responsibility for this week's show, as it was my choice. And personally, I think it is one of the best and probably more controversial and divisive horror movies the last few years. Now, I first saw Martyrs at Fright Fest back in 2008, I think it was, which is coincidentally the same year that I saw Midnight Meat Train, so it's a nice little tie-in with us there.
Really cool.
But the problem I have is that when I was watching the movies at Fright Fest, is that the festival at this, we watched it on a Sunday night, so it was like the 18th or 19th movie we'd watched by this time.
Oof.
So mentally and emotionally, it's just draining sitting in front of a TV, not a TV, a movie screen for that long.
Wow.
And my kind of levels of sleep depravity are through the roof at that point, because you're only operating on 5-6 hours sleep maximum. So it's quite hard to tell if your initial reaction to watching a movie is based on those emotions that you're feeling at that time. So it's hard to take the initial reaction away from it, and actually you can class good movies as, or sorry, bad movies as really good, and then when you rewatch it again, you're like, oh, why? I just don't get why I thought it was good at the time. But what I remember is when we walked out of the cinema, both my friend and I at the time, we just knew that we had just watched possibly the best movie of the festival so far. For me, it was one of the best movies that I'd ever seen, and not just in the horror genre, but across any genre. It just completely blew me away. Now, I've watched it probably about 4 or 5 times since then, I think, and it does lose its power, or for me anyway, the more that you watch it. But I've actually found that I've got more out of the movie every time I watch it, because I can start concentrating on other parts and actually pay more attention to all the little details in it and everything. But before I'm going to waffle on about it, I just want to see what your initial reactions were.
I did not expect in the slightest to enjoy it as much as I did. And I think to say you enjoyed it is a little bit, even that could be a touch controversial, because it's like, when you came, I'd be fascinated to see it at cinema. When you came out, was there just like this stunned silence? Was there sort of reverential end, or was it one of those where everybody was buzzing and just talking?
It was very quiet when we were walking out, because where we saw it was in the old Odeon in Leicester Square, so you had to walk up the stairs to get to the outside, because you all had to leave between movies. And I remember it being pretty quiet, and everyone not really saying very much. But then when we got out, that's all you heard everybody was talking about, was we heard people saying that they loved it. Apparently people had ran out in the middle of it, because they couldn't watch it. But whether that's just one of these rumours that circulated around and maybe someone just went to the bathroom and never came back, or what, but there was a lot of divisiveness between people that just hated it. Absolutely hated it. Let's say we loved it, and the girl that was sitting beside my friend, he said that she sobbed her heart out probably through the last half of the movie. She just couldn't stop shaking, so that took him out of the movie a little bit, but it just had that much of an impact on her.
Wow. It doesn't surprise me. We should say pretty early on about this. Okay, we're going to talk in pretty broad terms about the film, and we will be doing what will be considered as spoilers. But at the outset, as a listener, you've got a decision to make, and we're going to try and give you as much information to help you make that decision. This film is not for everyone. This film is not even for every horror fan, because some people can enjoy horror, but this is like a step beyond just horror.
Yeah, it's difficult how to put it. I think a lot of the horror comes from the emotion that you're going to go through watching it. It's not what you're going to see on screen, although what you'll see on screen is brutal at times, and you will have seen worse. But for me, I think it's the emotions and the way you will feel actually witnessing what you see on screen, which puts a lot of people off. And actually, I think that's where they're given a lot of negativity towards it. Is it's a movie that people, I don't think, understand why it's being made, and they will quickly, easily throw it into that category of torture porn,
No,
which it's not. It is not. So do not go into this if you haven't seen it thinking you're going to watch a Hostel or whatever it is they throw into that category, because this is definitely not one of those kind of movies.
This film actually, at the point where it could be the most gratuitous about lingering on gore, it goes away completely. Mm-hmm. It shuts the door and lets you imagine the process. And although, having seen the first part of the film, it doesn't blink, it doesn't look away. It's visceral and in your face. And then, at the end, because the mood of the movie changes, it doesn't show you what you would expect from something like Hostel. Hostel's way more visceral, gore, sort of lingering shots on what's actually happening.
Yeah.
But you can't compare them, really. I mean, the director does draw some influence from films like Hostel in this regard, but he's done it in a much more intelligent way.
Yes.
I think.
When he wrote this movie, he was in the stages of deep depression. And I think a lot of that you can see in some of the scenes, or if you understand depression and stuff, you can see, wow, I can see where you, maybe not coming from, but the thoughts that run through your head, and you can see putting someone else in that position. And I think that was one of the key things he wanted to get across, is the mental state of him when he was actually writing it, and what he envisaged in his head at the time. And he tried to get that across as much as he could, which I think is awesome that he wrote and directed it, because only he could get that vision across as to what the impact and the power of the movies and the scenes should actually be.
And he bless him, would have been a nightmare. I probably, if I was working on that set, I probably couldn't work with him, because, and he's the first to admit it, that he is a massive pessimist about everything, and he's never satisfied. Everything could be better. Everything could be done again. And the DVD copy I've got of this, there's a making of documentary on it, and it's one of the most honest on-set documentary styles I've seen, because it's like they filmed the whole film being filmed, is what it feels like. Mm-hmm. What the girls went through, stunt training, and how he got these incredible performances out of them. The set design, the special effects. I mean, it's just really good the way it's put together. It gives you a real insight. But he gave the girls a hard time. Just sort of, you've got to be consistent. If you come in yesterday and you were like this, when you come in today, you've got to be the same. You've got to remember what you did yesterday. Just dealing on them, really.
Yeah.
But when you see the results he got, they're just phenomenal. He's also, one of the other things he said is that the soundtrack was really hard in the editing process, because so many of the shots had him on. Whereas director said, I want you to do this, sit behind his monitor and let the scene run. Mm-hmm. He is calling direction mid-shot. Now do this, now give it more. No, change direction, do that. And he's directing them mid-shot.
Yeah.
Which I don't think I've ever seen before. But that's how personal it was to him, and that's how he... I mean, you watch this film and you'll see why it's so good, and that's part of it. It's just obsessive and just all over every aspect of the creation of the movie.
Yeah,
inspiring
definitely.
chat.
I guess to not completely do the review on it, but basically, it's, for me, it's a movie, or not a movie. Yeah, for me, it's a movie of kind of 3 acts. You've got your first opening act as being the kind of resolution. And so what happens is the movie opens and you're seeing this girl, teenage girl, if that, running down the street or an alleyway, just screaming. It looks as though that something has happened to her. She's been tortured or something, and she's just screaming and trying to get away from whatever it was that was happening to her. Now you find out during the course of the next few minutes what had happened to her, the fact that she was tortured, and you learn more about her backstory as the movie progresses. But basically, the opening scenes are her getting her revenge on her tormentors, and it's done in an amazing way. She just comes in, shotgun blazing, and just takes no prisoners, really. All emotion is just drained from her at the time, and she gets the resolution of her story. Now, where you would think that that's where a typical movie would end, or anything, this is the first 15-20 minutes.
Exactly.
And you're like, where are we going to go from here? This is the resolution of her story, what's going to happen?
And it's visceral as well. It's just... I can't remember if there's any music. It's just like that as she walks in and does that, it's just so matter of fact, and it's so like this is really happening.
Yeah, I mean, there's no music that I can. I was watching out for it this time. 'Cause I remember from the first time the sound playing such an important part in the movie, especially when you're sitting in a darkened room. And I think they probably had the sound turned up for this, but there's very, very little music that's used throughout the entire movie.
Right.
So the sound that you're hearing from the shotgun blast is jarring because it's this loud boom followed by some pretty amazing stunts.
Yes.
There's some kick behind this shotgun, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And this isn't giving anything away because, like I say, this happens in the first few minutes of the movie. It's not a big any big spoilers or anything. But it's just phenomenal to watch how they'd made these shots, or how they created the shots, and how they got the power and emotion of her resolution into it.
Yeah.
And then going from there, you've got what I call as the revelation stage. Is the fact that this woman has, or Lucy, which I haven't even said her names.
Yeah.
Lucy is the girl who was tortured as a child, and then when she was taken into I guess it was a hospital or a child's care home or something like that, she made this friend Anna, and they became best friends. I think it's clear to see that Anna loved Lucy, maybe even to the next level, as you see in one scene, more than Lucy did. But Anna is with her at the end. Lucy finishes her revenge, then Anna comes into it to basically clean up the mess, really, and to allow us to kind of move on and see what the next stage in Lucy's life is going to be. But this is where it takes a whole different turn and becomes Anna's movie.
Yeah.
Because she actually gets what classes the revelation as to, you know what, I didn't quite believe what Lucy was talking about or what she was imagining, but wow, I'm now getting an insight into what was going in her mind and what was causing her to have these images and these thoughts and these feelings. That's just like halfway through, and we've still got another act to go. Yeah. Once this revelation kicks off.
One thing I wanted to say is very early. It's like with the second scene, I think, after you see the little girl running away, and there's like a documentary crew going into where she ran away from. And they're going, here you can see clearly she was tied to this chair. This is where she was tortured. And the guy talking to the camera says, one thing we're positive of, there is absolutely no sign of sexual abuse. So it's made in the first 3 minutes of the film, you are basically told, okay, this is not about sex.
Yeah.
It's not sexual perversion we're looking at. This is not, this is something else. And it was my second watch. I really picked up on, he wanted to make that assertion very early on.
Yeah, because you could easily have delved into it being a sexual torture and making her worse.
Yeah.
Or even building on that as some sort of issue that she has with relationships or anything like going on. That could have turned so many different paths. But yeah, like you said, the fact that they clearly mention she was tortured and not in a sexual way, it kind of makes you go, really? Then who would possibly be doing this
exactly
to this child, just in a brutality way?
Because it seems like a really odd thing, and then this is where the whole movie ends up. Is the reason why this was being done. It's hard to know where to go next. I don't really want to spoil too much, even for those who are going to stick with it and listen, even though they're probably not going to watch the film.
Yeah, because the movie does take such a drastic turn, or a dramatic turn, you're probably looking at 30-40 minutes into it. It takes the other turn. Guess like a bit from Dusk Till Dawn. You're watching one movie and all of a sudden
yes.
It goes, what? Where are we going? This is a completely different type of movie. The similar thing does happen here. I think we need to spoil it.
Yeah, I do.
Because unfortunately we can talk about stuff and it's all going to be, we've tried to be kind of vague it is at the moment and just give you some thoughts on the feelings and emotions and how the scenes ran, but unfortunately I think we do have to definitely spoil this movie to be able to do it some sort of justice and actually talk about the impact that the ending in particular has on us both overall.
Yeah.
So if you're going to if you want to watch this movie and see what we're going to talk about, then stop now. Come back to it after you've watched the movie. Let it digest with you a little while, and then come back and pick up our thoughts on it. But if you don't care, or you've seen the movie and want to hear what we say, then listen on. So we shall. So for people from now on, we can spoiler free. Well, not spoiler free. We can be spoilerific.
Yeah.
And one of the big things for me on it is that the revelation scene or stage is when obviously Lucy has demons that she sees, has this figure of a dead child or dead woman that chases her, or she believes chases her. You actually, from the fact that it's something that's just imaginary in her head, that the torture that the dead woman is doing on Lucy she's actually self-inflicted.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of schizophrenic. I imagine to be kind of schizophrenic.
But he made me doubt that. And the reason being is the cuts on the back.
Yeah.
Because they're so on her back, and you're like, because up to that point I'm like, yeah, I know this device. This is her inner demon. She sees it. It's chasing her around the house, but it's not really there. Blah blah blah. But then it jumps her basically and just carves with a razor blade into her back, and I'm thinking, well, she couldn't have done that. And then I looked a bit later and I realised they're actually quite high up on the back of the shoulder, and she could have actually reached. But I think that was intentional to make you go, oh, is it really?
Yeah,
it certainly worked on me.
No, and rewatching again this last time, I was paying more attention to these parts, and you do see this demon just really tearing into the back.
Yeah.
But I think it's maybe just gored up a little bit for the viewer, whereas when she's obviously doing it, she's just slicing into her back. But it's been made to look a lot worse than I think what it actually might have been.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of the marks on her back that she cuts into herself, it does lead you to kind of doubt, really? Did she do that? How could you do that?
Yes.
What? How? Because that's kind of pretty straight. But she is self-harming. And she's not only getting the resolution of her story, you actually find out that the reason that she's seeing this dead woman is because she left her behind.
Yeah.
When she escaped from her torture, she heard her screaming and went back in to see what the screaming was. But unfortunately, it was one of those, I guess it was a choice that Lucy had to make, was, do I stay and try and help her, or do I just get the hell out of there and survive? And she made that choice, and it's haunted her ever since, and to the extent where she eventually takes her life. And they've both found this inner peace. Well, I think of it as an inner peace.
Oh, it is, definitely.
That she found within herself, that she's managed to kill these people who she's been thinking about for 15 years or so. How could you do this to me? And unfortunately, she can't. She doesn't actually give them the opportunity to answer that question.
She doesn't.
But she's confident in who it is that she's killing. We don't know if it's true or not. We've still got a million different questions going on. And
because that family is presented to you at sort of when they're introduced in their home. They're having breakfast and they seem like a really normal, functional, nice family. It's like, and then just suddenly this shitstorm arrives on them, and it does make you doubt that she's just gone off the deep end, and these are the people she's really looking for.
Yeah, because you're not given any clues whatsoever.
No.
You don't get any backstory on the family. They're not sitting around with, I don't know, big torture chambers hanging off the wall, or the kids are mentally depraved or tied up or anything like that. Like you say, it's a normal functioning family sitting down for Sunday breakfast, just doing what you expect normal families to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when you've got the whole Lucy takes her life and it ends the story, you're still like, hang on, I'm only halfway through this movie, if that.
Yeah.
Where's it going from next? And then you've got we'll go into the revelation stage that I'm calling it, where Anna finds, completely by chance, this passageway down into the basement, which is typically it's hidden behind a bookcase, because that's where all passageways are hidden.
Yeah.
And she goes down there and then starts to see this torture chamber. She can see the seat that there's a seat sitting down there with a bucket underneath it, just as I'm assuming that had been described to her from what Lucy sat on when she was taken, and she realises, oh my god, this is true, these are the people that Lucy wanted to kill. She's killed the correct people, and she did go through what she said she had gone through.
Yeah.
And I think she goes back to Lucy's body and apologises to her, and she's like, you know what, yeah, sorry, I didn't believe you properly.
Yeah.
And then it all kicks off again.
It does.
Because she finds this other woman.
Yeah, and this is actually one of the... That woman actually represents the bit that disturbed me the most. Because my first watch of this film, I just sort of... I don't know, it just sort of washed over me. Do you know what I mean? As a whole experience. Mm-hmm. And then I got a proper... I got a DVD copy of it and watched it on a bigger TV, basically, than just on a streaming sort of thing. And when I sat down to watch it that time, I found everything that bit more... sort of... not difficult, but more impacting, I guess. And that scene where she finds her and tries to help her, and just to find out she's made it worse.
Yeah.
That I found probably the hardest bit. And I think when people have been through what they have up to that point, I mean, obviously, having watched as much horror as I have and the kind of horrors I've watched, I am pretty desensitized to the kind of things that go on. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of refreshing to get to that and go, oh yeah, that's actually really unpleasant.
Yeah, and I mean the way it comes in, that the makeup and effects are just fantastic.
Oh, they're amazing.
It looks as though this woman has been through hell and back, and the metal helmet that she's wearing that's been stapled into her head, and it's just brutal is the word I'm going to keep coming back to.
The thing about that is she takes this thing off, so she has to prise these staples out with a screwdriver, because the staples are in her skull. The thing about that is it's probably worse to watch that than it is to watch him being banged in with a hammer.
Yeah.
Which sounds ridiculous when you say it, but I'm thinking, oh yeah, because they've been in there for that... Oh, just...
Yeah, you have no aspect of how long they've been in there for, how long this woman's been down there or anything like that. You have no time frames to know anything that's going on. It's just like, I can't imagine how it even got onto her head in the first place, let alone what type of people could put it onto her head or why.
Yes.
So yes, she obviously tries to help the girl out by taking this off of her, and I guess she wants to help. She wants to get her cleaned up and make her feel better, but she knows that she can't.
Well, this is out of the guilt thing as well, for having lost Lucy. She sees it as a chance to sort of make good on where she failed before.
Yes. And then all of a sudden, the woman that she's found just, I guess, turns a little bit crazy again. As you find out later that she imagines cockroaches all over her body.
Yeah. And
starts to bang her head and scratch her head off the wall, only for yet another shotgun to appear in the household.
Yeah.
And this is where it takes, I guess, the other turn, as we find this group of people all dressed in black just come into the house and start taking over. The Dusk Till Dawn moment, as I'm calling it. Yeah. Because it really is. You just find out that it's this, I don't know what it is, it's some sort of cult or organisation.
I think a sect to be a good word.
Yeah, sect, there you go, that's the perfect word. And they come in and just take over and start cleaning up, and I guess picking up where the other family had left off. Or they hadn't left off, but they'd been killed, so they couldn't do any more. Yeah. And then we meet one of the best characters, I think, is in the movie. Now, I don't know that because she's French or it's the language, I don't know what, but I just love we meet Mademoiselle. Yes. She's weird. She is. She looks weird, but it's just the way she talks. Like I say, I don't know if it had the same impact if you were watching it dubbed in English or anything. But just hearing the way that she talks and actually describing what, I guess, where the name for the movie Martyrs comes from, and what they're actually trying to achieve is that they are taking young women, because it works best in young women, and torturing them in any way possible, the clinical way to do that, to actually have these young women achieve that status of martyrdom and actually see if there is anything beyond what there is in life, if there's any heaven there, or what the next world looks like, and then have that relayed back to the people on Earth. And that's what they're trying to do. And you're like, oh, okay. And then you spend like the next half hour actually watching what it is they do. And this is what it just drained me. Every time I watch it, I just get drained from watching it, because it's just, this is where the use of sound comes in, and it's just, everything is so clinical. Which I guess is the choice that the director had made, or the set designers had made, that everything is clinical. It's all metal, easily washed down. There is nothing there that is for comfort at all. It's just all like one big operating room, and it's designed for this purpose. It's a purpose-built basement, or torture chamber, if you want to call it that, which they use for taking these young women and beating the crap out of them until they can take no more, to be honest.
Well, I get the disturbing part is that sort of regular ongoing beatings and feeding them this sort of yellow gruel, which is, you imagine, is just the most tasteless basic nutrition needed to survive.
Yeah.
But then there's no salt, there's no sugar, it doesn't taste of anything. That's what I'm imagining, and this being forced down your neck, and then if you spit it out or don't swallow, you get punched in the face. That's the light side of it. That's what they use to sort of, introduce you to the further suffering you're going to have to endure. And yet you watch this and think, God, how could you manage to put up with that? It's just heartrending.
This scene in particular, when you actually see the fight being taken out of her, or her coming to the decision that she doesn't have the fight in her anymore. Yeah. She's lost. She is just going to have to accept what's happening to her. It makes me break down. It's the more you watch it, the more you know it's coming, and you can see from the fact they bring the music into it. It's one of the only places they do bring some music into it, and you can see, okay, this is the heart tugging moment, but it's still.
Yeah, this is the point at which her soul snapped.
Yeah,
like a loud twig in an empty forest. You know what I mean? Just bang.
You've seen her fight anytime she's taking the beatings from that beast of a man.
Yeah,
he is one big dude.
He is.
And you've seen her fight or maybe not fight, but wanting to spit that vile, disgusting food up every time she gets it. But then when you see her just sitting there and she's resigned to the fact, there's no point. If she comes to feed me, I'm going to come and feed you. Or I'm going to take it, I'm going to eat it, I'm going to drink whatever you give me to drink. And I'm just going to accept what happens from here on in.
Yeah.
But from watching it again, I'd noticed that the torturers, because they're never given a name.
No.
So I'll call them the torturers. The woman in particular is really brutal. I noticed to her.
Yeah.
And you can see her softening when she realises she'd be able to feed her without the fight back.
Yes.
She becomes softer.
She starts to empathise a little bit, I think.
Yeah, but she obviously knows that this is her moving on to the next stage. This is where they're wanting to get her. She's seeing this young woman grow into what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And
what they're trying to achieve in the next few scenes from that is... wow.
Do we say?
I don't know. It takes a turn which I never imagined a movie could take a turn into.
No.
But we don't want to see. I don't know, because if you're still intrigued about watching this and you haven't watched it, you will not see the next scenes coming.
No.
I guarantee you are a liar if you knew what's coming next.
But these are the scenes I say when they could have gone the hostile route with. They don't.
No.
They shut the door and come back later, and that is powerful. The way it's because a lot of people are very critical of this film. They call it depraved and all this kind of thing, and I think a lot of the negative stuff is actually taken away from the care that's gone into making it. And if the director and the creators were only interested in shock value, controversy, if they were only doing a Tom 6, is it Tom 6? Centipede 2?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, Human Centipede 2. If they were trying to do that, then, it would have just been cameras blaring. But this is way more insightful and thought about than that, I think. So they do leave it to the imagination, which is, as we all know, is often the most powerful device. So
Yes. I remember just watching it the first time and going, oh my god. And that just kept running through my head was, oh my god, really?
yeah,
What?
yeah,
And a bit like, I guess, grateful that you didn't see that part from where it starts to the end result. Because it was like, I don't think I could have physically sat through and watched that
no,
actually happening. I might have been repulsed by it, but even more, I think I'd have been wrecked by it. Knowing what she's gone through up to then and thinking that she'd taken as much beating as she could take,
yeah,
and then to the next levels that these people will go to achieve what their end result is. And I think I guess we can get away with the fact that she does achieve that stage.
yeah.
Hopefully.
The thing I like, the point of her reaching that stage is actually punctuated from a scream coming up from the torture chamber, and Mr. Big Brute goes running down to see what it was.
Yeah. You never find out anything about this kind of sect, as to why they're doing it, as to who's behind it all, as to are these people that choose this route, or they brought up as kids into this route, or anything like that. The sect is very secretive, but you do find out that it's contained mostly of elderly people. Everybody that you see that comes to the house to actually experience or find out about
The words from beyond.
yes, that's the way they put it,
Yeah.
are all elderly. They're all 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. There aren't really any younger people there,
No.
which kind of adds a bit more, I don't know, it makes it a bit more creepy.
Yeah.
That I don't know if it's just this a bunch of rich old people. I'm assuming them to be rich. Rich old people who get together and just want to find out what's there for them at the end of it.
Well, they're probably funding it all as well, if you think about it. If they're in this sect, they'll all be like, I don't know, tithing or something to sort of get the money together to support the people who have to day in, day out do this horrible stuff to people.
Yeah.
I got seeing them all arrive like that sort of put it all in a different context for me. I was like, yeah, it'd be like they'd have a group accountant and all that kind of thing. And I thought about it way too much, clearly.
Definitely if you're getting into the group accountant section.
I was on the third watch. I've watched this film 3 times in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I've watched all the directors interview, the making of, every extra on the DVD. I mean, that's what it sort of how it got me. So
That's heavy going then, to watch it 3 times in 2 weeks.
I think that some people come out sort of decimated by the film, and I think I find the character of Anna really inspiring, and I don't necessarily come away from it now with quite the, I don't know how to put it really. It doesn't depress me. It's sort of because I appreciate the film so much now and the process of the film so much. It's because it's on my love list of films. I am not just looking at the characters anymore, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
So
I think it does, yeah.
I don't want to sound heartless or bad or whatever that this film gives me a good feeling, but it's because I'm looking at everything around it. It's it's the way it was written, the way it's directed, the way it's shot, just as a complete work, it's so well done. I can't help but like it.
Yeah.
So,
I'd like to say like is a difficult term to use for this type of movie.
it really is, and I'm worried about how I'm coming across saying that because.
No, I think anybody that respects the genre and respects the type of movie that this is, will see. It's like ending The Mist.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy the movie, or is it wrong to say you enjoyed the movie, based on what you got out of it? But you've got to use it. You can't say, "Oh, the movie's." You got to put words to it.
But you see, if a film utterly destroys me at the end, like The Mist did, I just... The first time you watch The Mist, it's like your guts just go on the floor, and you go, huh, like someone just pulled the string out of your back. All of the air just deflates from you, and you're like, no way.
Which is
But
what
then-
I felt the first time I watched this.
Yes, exactly. And then the next time you watch it, and then the next time you watch it, because it did that to you once, you love it for that. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I'm going to use the word enjoyed, but because this could be a completely different conversation if both of us were arguing over how strongly we felt about it. But I'm glad that you seem to have felt the same way that I did, and I managed to introduce you to what you say is one of your favourite horror films.
It's up in my top 5. There's no question, because of my background in horror, what I like about horror. But to have something so intelligently done, I was not expecting it to be like that, and it shocked me. It made me cry the first time round. It did everything it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
So well. But I can also completely understand why some people hate it, revile it, can't stand it, walk out of it, turn it off. This is not for everyone.
No.
You have to be a certain type of film fan, and say if Hostel is something you'd never watch, or couldn't handle. Although for different reasons, it's probably a fairly good benchmark to say don't watch this.
Yes. I think, yeah.
But I say for different reasons.
Completely different reasons. If you're turned off by gore, and that's all that stops you because you think that's all Hostel is, then don't be turned off by this one, because it's not gory to an extent.
I was referring more to the human suffering angle.
That's where I was going to use my word again, brutal. It's the brutality of it, more than anything, and to actually witness what someone who believes, it's not someone who's choosing to do this from the Hostel point of view because they're paying to do it to get some sort of sick, or sick to us, but to get some sort of kick out of it, to get some sort of adrenaline rush. These people aren't doing it for that. These people are doing it as it's their belief, as they believe they're doing something for the good of others, basically. And that can be, I think that's harder to watch or hard to comprehend at the end. You can maybe laugh Hostel off as saying, yeah, that's never going to happen. Whereas this one, I think you could actually see it with the religious undertones of it.
Yes, I was going to say.
That it could well happen, or you can see people going to those lengths to achieve it. And it's just, I love the movie for what it makes me feel, how it makes me feel, and the fact that it still has this power. And it's a movie I'm still able to think about 4.5, 5 years later. And I still know how I felt when I walked out of the movies, and I'm really interested in people coming to it fresh, what they actually think of it. So, like I say, I'm really glad that I picked a good one.
Oh, you did.
To start things off with, and I probably put it as too much on a pedestal. We went to set the bar too high on the first one, probably. So it's going to be difficult to now find another movie that's going to jump into top 5 of all time or whatever.
Oh, but I look forward to it happening, because I'm sure it will at some point.
You never know. You never know what more gems will be uncovered along the way. But like I say, hopefully there'll be other people out there who haven't seen it, who will be able to share their first feelings on it, and want to kind of start up a discussion on it and actually email it and tell us what they thought, or even if you didn't like it, let us know, and let us know why you didn't like it.
Well, that's what I'm interested in, because I'm very biased the other way now. So if somebody absolutely hates it, then good forum thread. People get on there and talk about it. Well, there's one other thing I wanted to mention before the end. Sorry, that Anna, especially the actor Morjana, you say her name. It's Oscar time. Oscars is coming up, and you see people, nominated for best this, best that, best the other. Nobody has a clue who this girl is. The acting required to make this movie believable, I think, is amazing. And at no point does any performance take you out of it.
No.
But hers is so blisteringly powerful. The point at which she's got chains round her wrists while she's in this chamber, and she's chained to the wall. They're long chains. She can move around the room, but at the end of the day, she's not going anywhere. And her initial fight, she's just trying to pull the wall down, and screaming and pulling on these chains. That is one of the most powerful things in this movie. And she sold it to me 110%. The performance is unbelievable.
Oh, definitely. This is a girl who had to go home at night, try and wind down from a day's shooting, and then, like you say, come back in the next day and pick up at that exact point.
Yeah, the same intensity.
Yes.
Yeah, just
and the the levels that she's going through.
I'm sorry, it just makes me laugh. I'm sorry, it's actually bad to be laughing. It's just your choice of words there, the levels that she went through, because not only did she have to the next day come back, during shooting she fell through the ceiling and landed on her face, and she broke 3 bones. And they they couldn't set the cast. They couldn't put a cast on her to heal the bones, so she had to go back to Paris and stay in bed for a month.
Really?
To let the bone re-knit. So they had a 1-month break in shooting, and they were shooting the last third of the film.
Oh, wow.
So this is before she had a haircut.
Uh-huh.
Which obviously has to happen towards the end. So not only saying she's got to come back day to day with that intensity, she had a month's break, had to come back on set and pull off that performance again. I mean, they had a few unlucky things with the shooting, but that was probably the worst. And I would say, if you're going to get the DVD or rent the DVD, I'd recommend that and watch that making of. I know a lot of people don't bother with extras, but in the case of this film, also, if you finish the film and you've got that, it's just taken everything out of you, to watch the creative process behind it. If you watch that straight away afterwards, I think that will sort of help you with how you walk away from the whole thing.
But we could go on and on and on
Yeah,
about
we
this.
should shut up, shouldn't we?
And I think we have gone on and on and on about this. This is when I really want to hear people's views on. So please, 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 if you have seen it, email in to thelittlepodofhorrors@gmail.com or go to the forum. I'll try and put up a discussion thread on this when we're releasing the episode, and we can talk about it more in there. But I'd love to hear your views. If you've seen the movie and didn't like it, or if you haven't seen it and we've encouraged you to go watch it, and what your initial impact or initial thoughts of the movie was. Now, as it currently stands, we don't have anything lined up for next week's show.
We don't, do we?
No, we don't, because that would involve planning, and unfortunately life has got in the way. But so this is a good way of keeping it another surprise for you for next time. And I'll just throw it out there to the wonderful boys and say, you can choose next time. Put the pressure on you.
Okay. I'm going to go completely the other way, because there's no way I can top Martyrs. So I'm going to try and go to the absolute opposite end of the scale.
Where will we go next? Where will Boz take us as a complete 180 again? And on that note, I think it's time to draw it to a close. So, as always, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to yourself, Boz.
No, thank you, sir.
And
pleasure was mine.
Thank you. And to thank everybody out there for listening. So until next time, bye-bye.
Goodbye.
If you would like to send an email to the show, please do so at thelittlepodofhorrors@gmail.com. Also, why not go along to the website at www.thelittlepodofhorrors.com, and from there you can find links to our Twitter, Facebook, Google+, forum and blog page. Thanks for listening.